Hey guys, so I was trying to think of what text I could read you that I just love rereading, and that was really easily available. And I decided to go for one that is in school. So you can get this in the library. There's a certain person in year 4 as well, Wally, who absolutely has fallen in love with Percy Jackson. And it's his current favourite book as well. So it's by Rick Riordan, and it's Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. It's the first one of a series of 6. And you could read 1, or you could read 6, or you could read all 20, I think it is now, of the sequels that he's gone on to write. And it's so cool. It's set in, like, a modern world, but it has all of the ancient Greek gods and all of them together in, like, the modern world with the children they've had with mortals. So it's just really cool. And there's a series on Disney Plus about it, which is amazing. And there's 2 movies that they made on it as well. And there's even graphic novels of the first book, like a comic strip style book. Graphic novel being like a full book, but it has pictures as well as just writing. So it's really accessible. And it's also in supermarkets for about £3 or £4 and the local library. So it's everywhere. Okay. Now I'm going to read the first chapter, and I love the chapter names, but I really do feel like this is something Sandpiper would get behind, because I think they would quite like it if it happened to me. It's called I Accidentally Vaporize My Teacher. I think sometimes if I'm being too mean or strict, they would quite like to vaporize me and get rid of me. So, look, I didn't want to be a half-blood. If you're reading this because you think you might be one, my advice is close this book right now. Believe whatever lie your mum and dad told you about your birth and try and lead a normal life. Being a half-blood is dangerous. It's scary. Most of the time, it'll get you killed in painful, horrible ways. And if you're a normal kid reading this because you think maybe it's fiction, that's amazing. Great. Read on. I envy you for being able to believe that none of this ever happened. But if you recognise yourself in these pages, if you feel something stirring inside, stop reading immediately, because you might be one of us. And once you know it, it's only a matter of time before they sense it. And they will come and find you. Don't say I didn't warn you. My name's Percy Jackson. I'm 12 years old. And until a few months ago, I was a boarding student at Yancey Academy, a private school for troubled kids in upstate New York. Am I a troubled kid? I suppose you could say that. I could start at any point in my short and miserable life to prove it, but things really started going bad last May, when our 6th grade took a field trip to Manhattan. 28 crazy kids and 2 teachers on a yellow school bus heading into the Metropolitan Museum of Art to look at ancient Greek and Roman stuff. I know, it sounds like torture. Most field trips are. But Mr. Brunner, our Latin teacher, well, he was leading this trip, so I actually had really high hopes. Mr. Brunner is this middle-aged guy in a motorised wheelchair, and he had thinning hair and a scruffy beard, and he had a frayed tweed jacket, which always smelled like coffee. You wouldn't think he'd be cool, but he told stories and jokes, and he let us play these games in class as we learned. And he had this awesome collection of Roman armour and weapons, so he was like the only teacher who didn't put me to sleep. I hoped the trip would be okay. I mean, at least I hope for once that I wouldn't get in trouble, but boy was I wrong. See, bad things happen to me on field trips. Like at my 5th grade school, when we went to the Saratoga battlefield, I had this accident with a Revolutionary War cannon, and I really wasn't aiming for the school bus, but of course, I got expelled anyway when it exploded. And before that, at my 4th grade school, we took a behind-the-scenes tour of Marine World at the Shark Pool, and I sort of hit the wrong lever on the carpet, and our class sort of took an unplanned swim. And then there was this time before, well, you get the point. This trip, though, I was determined to be good. And all the way into the city, I put up with Nancy Bobofet, this freckly, red-headed kleptomaniac thief girl, hitting my best friend Grover in the back of the head with chunks of peanut butter and ketchup sandwich. Who eats peanut butter and ketchup? Grover, he was an easy target. He was really scrawny, and he cried when he got frustrated. And he must have been held back several years, because he was the only 6th grader with acne and a beard on his chin. And on top of all of that, he was crippled. He had a note excusing him from PE for the rest of his life because he had some sort of muscular disease in his legs. He walked funny, like every step hurt him. But don't let that fool you, though. You should see him run when it was enchilada day in the cafeteria. Anyway, Nancy Bobofet is throwing wads of sandwich that's stuck in his curly brown hair, and she knew I couldn't do anything back to her because I was already on probation. The headmaster had threatened me with death by in-school suspension if anything bad, embarrassing, or even mildly entertaining happened on this trip. I'm going to kill her, I mumbled. Grover tried to calm me down. It's okay. I like peanut butter. He dodged another piece of her lunch. That's it. I started to get up, but Grover pulled me back to my seat. You're already on probation, he reminded me. You know who'll get blamed if anything happens. Looking back on it, I really wish I'd just decked Nancy Boba Fett right there and then. In-school suspension would have been nothing compared to the mess I was about to get myself into. Mr. Brunner led the museum tour. He rode up in front in his wheelchair, guiding us through the big echoey galleries and past marble statues and glass cases full of really old black and orange pottery. It blew my mind that this stuff had somehow survived for 2,000 or 3,000 years. He gathered us around a 4-metre tall stone column with a big sphinx on the top, and he started telling us how it was a grave marker, a stele, for a girl who was about our age. He told us about the carvings on the side, and I was trying to listen to what he had to say because it was kind of interesting, but everyone around me was talking, and every time I told them to shut up, the other teacher, Mrs. Dodds, she'd give me the evil eye. Mrs. Dodds was this little maths teacher from Georgia who always wore a black leather jacket, even though she was about 50 years old. She looked mean enough to ride a Harley Davidson right into your locker. And she'd come to Yancey halfway through the year when our last maths teacher had like a total nervous breakdown. From her first day, Mrs. Dodds loved Nancy, and I figured that she thought I was devil spawn. She'd point her crooked finger at me and go, "Now, honey!" real sweet. And I knew I was just going to get an after-school detention for a month. One time, after she made me erase answers out of old maths workbooks until midnight, I told Grover that I didn't think she was human. He looked at me really serious and he went, "You are absolutely right." Mr. Brunner kept talking about Greek funeral art, and finally Nancy snickered something about the naked guy on the stele, and I turned around and said, "Will you just shut up?" It came out so much louder than I thought it would. The whole group laughed, and Mr. Brunner stopped his story. "Mr. Jackson," he said, "did you have a comment?" My face was totally red. "No, sir." Mr. Brunner pointed to one of the pictures on the stele. "Maybe you'd like to tell us what this picture represents?" I looked at the carving and I felt a flush of relief because I actually did recognise it. "That's Kronos eating his kids, right?" "Yes," Mr. Brunner said, obviously not satisfied. "And he did this because, well," I racked my brain to remember. "Kronos was the king of gods." "And God?" Mr. Brunner asked. "Titan," I said. "And he didn't trust his kids, who were the gods, so he ate them, right? But his wife hid the baby Zeus and gave Kronos a rock to eat instead. And then when Zeus grew up, he tricked his dad, Kronos, into barfing up his brothers and sisters." "Ew," said one of the people behind me. "And so there was this big fight between the gods and the Titans," I continued, "and the gods won." Some snickers from the group. Behind me, Nancy Boba Fett mumbled to a friend, like we're going to use this in real life. Like it's going to say on our job application, "Please explain why Kronos ate his children." "And why, Mr. Jackson," Brunner said, to paraphrase Miss Boba Fett's excellent question, "does this matter in real life?" "Busted," Grover muttered. "Shut up," Nancy hissed. At least Nancy got in trouble too. Mr. Brunner was the only one who ever caught her saying anything wrong. He had like radar ears. I thought about his question and I said, "I don't really know." "I see," Mr. Brunner said, looking disappointed. "Well, half credit, Mr. Jackson. Zeus did indeed feed Kronos a mixture of mustard and wine, which made him vomit his other 5 children, who, of course, being gods, had been living and growing up completely undigested in the Titan's stomach. The gods defeated their father and sliced him into tiny pieces with his own scythe and scattered his remains in Tartarus, the darkest, most evil part of the underworld. On that happy note, it's time for lunch. Miss Dodds, would you lead us back outside?" The class drifted off, the girls holding their stomachs and the guys pushing each other around and acting like giant doofuses. Grover and I were about to follow when Mr. Brunner said, "Mr. Jackson," and I knew what was coming. I told Grover to keep going. I turned towards him. "Mm-hmm." He had this look that wouldn't let you go. Intense brown eyes that could have been 1,000 years old and had seen everything. "You must learn the answer to my question," he said. "About the Titans?" "About real life. Your studies depend on it." "What you learn from me," he said, "is vitally important, and I expect you to treat it from such, because I will only accept the best from you, Percy Jackson." I wanted to get angry because this guy pushed me so hard all the time. Right, I'm going to stop there. Now, what I really like about the chapters as well is, because there's about 5-6 chapters left in this, 5-6 pages left in this chapter. And the chapters all end with like a little cliffhanger. And then I don't know about you, but when I have a cliffhanger and I don't know what's going to happen next, I have to read it. Like, it's really Moorish and I get to discover what comes next. So, my recommendation, going into Christmas, in case Santa is still yet to put something in that stocking at the end of your bed, or you're still yet to think of a present, who wants a PlayStation or an Xbox when you could have Percy Jackson, right? Okay. Well, definitely consider this book. It's so fun. We've got a copy in Sandpiper's Classroom if you want it. And I'm so sure there's at least 3 or 4 copies that Miss Rose bought, the lovely Miss Rose, and put in our school library. Okay. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you after Christmas. Merry Christmas.